Hey everyone, it's YJ and this is my first year on T. When I first knew I was trans, I got a haircut pretty soon afterwards. It was a pretty feminine haircut, but it still nevertheless made me comfortable in my body a lot more than having long hair. That caused me a lot of dysphoria at the time, even though I didn't name it as dysphoria. And I slowly but surely started changing the way that I presented my gender, so the clothes that I was wearing, how I styled my hair. By the way, I really need a haircut. And it was all in alignment of what made me feel the most comfortable in my body. Socially, I guess, I didn't really explicitly start transitioning until much later, but I did notice that around my junior year of high school, I started getting he/him a lot more in public. I was taking classes at the local community college, and so I enrolled in new classes with new classmates every semester. And I noticed that professors and classmates started using he/him around that time, and it was really odd because I wasn't trying to fast, and I wasn't really thinking about that at the time. I wasn't really thinking about that because I was thinking more internally about my sexuality and my gender and how I wanted to express that and how I identify. With people that already knew me, I wasn't out as trans, and so I was misgendered then by no fault of the people that I was with. This was particularly the case in the workplace. I worked at a middle school and I didn't come out to anybody, and so I was misgendered a lot. But because I presented very masculine, it caused a lot of confusion, especially with the kids, about what my gender was. And kids are very curious and they can be mean, and so they had a lot of discussions with me, discussions with each other. It was almost a game to them to figure out what my gender was, and it started a lot of arguments between students actually. And it took me a while to realize when people were being malicious and when people were just curious, both with children and adults. And so I've sort of learned to give people grace in that a lot of their harmful or hurtful statements are just ignorance, and so giving them room to learn about gender identity and grow. I wasn't out, and so I didn't really expect people to gender me correctly, but I found that most of the time, because of the way I dressed and because my face is pretty androgynous, I was gendered correctly when people didn't know that I was assigned female kid. So my old school and my old friends and all. On the phone, of course, I get ma'am a lot. I think now, or in the past couple of months, I've been getting sir a lot more because my voice has gotten a lot more bass. But it's really funny actually. My brother, when he doesn't want to go through my parents to get authorization for appointments or whatever because he's under the age of 18, he usually calls me and has me pretend to be our mom. And it's getting really difficult for me to do that because my voice is so low now. So I have to really use my falsetto almost to try to get in that range. And it still works, but it's just really funny to have me have to strain to do that. I feel like recently gender has been less important in how people view me because I've gained a lot more confidence on testosterone and in the past year about what my identity is and is not, and my expression, and really moving outside of the binary and how restrictive it can be both in presentation and in identity itself. And so I don't know, it's been kind of liberating almost to not really care about those types of things, and in what used to give me a lot of dysphoria doesn't really bother me in those same ways anymore. Misgendering sucks, especially when people view it as a game to sort of figure out what gender you are, or when they're really malicious about it. And I know it can be really, really hurtful. But I guess I just let it roll off my back now, and I guess if anything, I've usually had the privilege of passing, and I know there's a lot of rhetoric surrounding the privilege of passing as this, but I've usually been able to pass, and if anything, pass as a really young boy. And so it's been really interesting to see how people interact with me and how people treat me based on how they perceive me. And so not necessarily reading me as a female, although that happens sometimes. And that says a lot about how people treat you. But also being read as a young person and how people tend to write you off and dismiss you because of your age. And so being 20 now and having been treated as a young person for the past 5 to 7 years, it gets a little old sometimes. It's also a little funny just to see like 16-year-olds talk down to you because they think they're older than you. And so a lot of these things I've just learned to write off and just laugh about. Especially because I know who I am. I know what my gender is. I know what makes me feel the most comfortable. And so the rest doesn't matter as much anymore.